Environment for Worship, Mystery of Sacred Space, and the readings from the first letter of Peter. So come to him, our living stone, the stone rejected by men, but choice and precious in the sight of God. Come and let yourselves be built as living stones into a spiritual temple. Become a holy priesthood, to offer spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. One of the mysteries of the New Testament is that although it's the culmination of scriptural revelation and the fulfillment of all prophecy, although it pronounces the final word, it's always affirming a beginning. It testifies to fulfillment and initiates the new age. We can see this strikingly in the New Testament account of the priesthood of Christ. It proclaims that by the uniqueness of his sacrificial death as priest and victim, Christ has summed up all priesthoods and has achieved in his own person all that they had tried to do from the beginning of time, to unite God and man in love. Because Jesus has thus realized priesthood, he is the priest of all humanity and has entered once for all into the Holy of Holies. If this were all the New Testament proclaimed about the priesthood of Christ, his fulfillment of prophecy and revelation, then it would be magnificent but somehow static, like a beautiful but untouchable exhibit in a museum. But the new beginning, which the achievement of the priestly Christ initiates, is the communication of the fullness of his priesthood to his church. In the new covenant, it is the people themselves who are made sacred by their participation in the life and holiness of their priest, Redeemer, King. Come and let yourselves be built as living stones into a spiritual temple. Become a holy priesthood, to offer spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. The sacredness of the Church is nothing other than the holiness of the people who constitute the Church at any one time and in any one place. People in their kairos and topos, their time and space, are the chosen and dedicated of God. And so, all consideration of the environment for worship must spring from this quintessential insight, that the environment for worship is a pure heart, because the holiness of a place is the holiness of the persons gathered there. As St. Peter wrote, "Your beauty should reside not in outward adornment, but in the inmost centre of your being, with its imperishable ornament, a gentle, quiet spirit, which is of high value in the sight of God." In this Christian vision of worship, sacred space is not a magical arena that conjures up an absent God. It springs rather from the hearts of the worshippers, because of the space they allow to be created in themselves and to be filled with the fullness of Christ. It is the holiness of this interior space that sanctifies the place of worship. The first step in the creation of an environment for worship is, therefore, the sanctification of the hearts of the worshippers, or rather, the realization of the holiness already there. And this realization is achieved as they turn from self to the God present in the faith of the community. This is why we have always to remember that holiness is not fundamentally a moral quality. It is rather the unique experience of presence. This is a very real, unambiguous experience. But the reality, though objective, is beyond the power of any language to describe, or of any building to contain. The presence of God is not a transportable commodity, nor is it magnetically attracted down to earth by certain environmental formulae. But it is manifested in the true worship of his people, not tied to mountain or to temple, but to the other-centeredness of prayer in spirit and in truth. Become a holy priesthood, Peter tells us. Realize your priesthood. This is the invitation to undertake the pilgrimage to our own heart and to worship the God who is present, dwelling there in love. The journey is a journey to reality, away from illusion that tries to construct reality only in externals, like building a house without foundations. It is a journey away from the egoism of superficial self-reliance and towards the kairos and topos, which will transfigure us in the other. Mircea Eliade, in his Patterns of Comparative Religion, describes this as a journey towards the center of one's own being and away from unreality. The power that springs from this understanding in faith enshrined in the New Testament opens our eyes to see that our whole life partakes of the consecration that Jesus achieves through his perfect priesthood. Central to this act of consecration is our summons to the Holy of Holies within, to our heart, where right now the human heart of Jesus worships and loves the Father. It is our holiness to enter wholly into this mystery. The actual space set aside by the community for its celebration of the sacredness of this mystery is, of course, of considerable importance. And I don't think it's fanciful to enumerate the prerequisites of the sacred space that we use as the locus of our external worship, or where we externalize the worship that goes on unceasingly within. They are the same prerequisites for the space that we must create in our hearts so that they may be worshipful. And they are the fundamental religious and spiritual qualities of simplicity, silence, and awe. Sacredness and mystery are rooted in the absolute otherness of God. He is utterly beyond the limits of our minds to comprehend, but in the Christian vision, not of our hearts to love. And the natural way for us to accommodate ourselves to this is to accept the invitation we have received and to enter the mystery in simplicity. Complexity of thought or feeling project us further from the mystery, because it's the function of such complexity to try the impossible, to try to see God as an object and to analyze him in the third person. Prayer, worship, demands a total simplicity of spirit that is the prerequisite of openness to the otherness of God and to his closeness. Eventually, this openness in utter simplicity will transcend all images and all forms. No man has ever seen God. And so the environment for worship should manifest the simplicity of spirit in which we turn courageously, childlike, to God. it should be uncluttered, as free as possible from a superfluity of images, and possessing a quality of real purity. The vital importance of the idea of the holy consists in the fact that man must never compromise the deep and awesome reverence that he has for God. It's a reverence born out of consciousness of his own holiness, knowing that at the center of his being the presence of God dwells, and that there he has his only real being. No other external or internal image can bear comparison with this reality, and most distract from it. He must treasure this reverence for his correspondence to God, in case he invest his awe in some lesser being. The danger of idolatry is always with us. When St. Peter talks of the holy priesthood of the Christian community, he talks of the offering of spiritual sacrifices through Jesus Christ. And in so doing, he reaffirms one of the central themes of the gospel and of the earthly ministry of Jesus. The merely external is not only profitless, but positively destructive of our integrity, because it embeds us in illusion. The basic truth is that everything external in our worship has to spring from what is authentic, internal, and to use a dangerous word, sincere. The biblical word for authenticity in this sense is righteousness. And as St. Paul took pains to argue, it does not depend just on ourselves and our own efforts. We cannot authenticate ourselves, and the only power that can do so is one that will be at the same time beyond us, free of our limitations and our divided hearts, and yet intimately present to us, united to us. And the good news of the gospel is precisely that the sacrificial love of Jesus, present in his body the church, and in our hearts through his indwelling Spirit, is that power. The realization of this reality is prayer and worship. Prayer that is a living sacrifice, and worship that is offered by mind and heart. In other words, it is the whole person turned wholly to God, in openness to the power that is given to us. A gentle, quiet spirit, St. Peter says. This is the quality of silence that is an indispensable part of prayer, indeed, the condition of prayer. We all know from our own experience that silence with another is a sign and upbuilder of trust, respect, ease. As this quality expands in our religious life, and we learn to share in the silence of prayer with others, it begins to dawn on us that silence is not just a sign, but a reality in itself. Not just a medium, but the message. This does not, of course, mean that an authentic spoken word will automatically shatter the silence of a praying community. But it does mean that the respect for the centrality of silence acknowledges the lordship, the transcendent presence of Christ, and recognizes his as the initiative. All spoken words point to that presence. And there is, as St. Paul would say, a great mystery hidden here, into which we have been summoned and where we now stand. The silence of a praying community is an analogy of, a participation in, the nature of Jesus as Son of the Father, Listen to Ignatius of Antioch writing to the Ephesians. It is better to keep silent and be than to make fluent professions and not be. No doubt it's a fine thing to instruct others, but only if the speaker practices what he preaches. One such teacher there is, he who spoke the word and it was made. And what he achieved, even by his silences, was well worthy of the Father. A man who has truly mastered the utterances of Jesus will also be able to apprehend his silence, and thus reach full spiritual maturity, so that his own words have the force of actions, and his silences the significance of speech. I'd like to end by looking more closely at the word significance. I've suggested to you that a sacrament is something that reveals the meaning in our experience, takes us beyond the surface level of distraction and complexity, and reveals the simple, creatively silent presence of the loving power of Christ in our hearts and in our communities. Sacraments are signs, but they are effective signs that make something, signum facere, significance. Sacraments manifest the inner meaning of our experience. They bring meaning from the depths of our own being, from the mystery of Christ's presence within us. But they do more than that. From the living spring within us, they give us power to testify to his love by our own loving service in the community of the redeemed and to all mankind.